Now, of course, we're in lifestyle management, chapter 6, managing your weight. And this is going to be just in part 1 so far. So in this chapter, we're going to manage our weight is something that many people are conscious of on a daily basis. Others don't even give it another thought at all. So learning about nutrition issues, accepting the responsibility of our own food choices, and planning for a lifetime of healthy eating can be both really very empowering and exciting. So in part 1, we're going to review the global obesity epidemic with particular interest to exploring some of the causes of obesity. And we'll also explore a pretty popular question: how much should I weigh? We'll finish part 1 with some of the health dangers of excessive weight. So let's proceed and begin with part 1 of managing your weight. Now we're going to begin by looking at the global obesity epidemic. And it's an epidemic because a lot of the population of the world is becoming a little more affluent, which is also translating into eating a little bit more. Since 1975, obesity rates have more than tripled around the world. The result from Statistics Canada in 2016-17 for just Canada revealed that 27% of the Canadian adults were classified as obese. Now, we need to be aware of what we think obesity or obese is in our imagination and what is obese by medical standards. These can sometimes be two different things. So we're going to look at the term of obesity and look at it as being a medical issue. And it might be similar, or it could even be quite a bit different than what you've imagined it to be. So it's just an interesting kind of phenomena that in such an affluent country like Canada, that it's not surprising that people might eat more. However, is that the cause of obesity, or are there other implications? And that's one of the things that we're going to explore. We're going to consider them, some of those. And in 2014, nearly 42 million children around the ages of age 5 worldwide were overweight. The increasing number of overweight and obese Canadians now poses one of the greatest threats ever to public health in our country. Now, while the quest for thinness has become a national obsession, so it seems kind of peculiar, doesn't it, that we would not be able to manage our own weight, particularly well, to the point of establishing high water marks for obesity. And yet we're particularly concerned about how we're supposed to look, and this pursuit of thinness each year. Millions of Canadians go on diets. No matter how much they lose, 90 to 95% of those people who dieted will regain the extra pounds within 5 years. So our compulsion, if you will, towards dieting is, we seem to have meant it as a quick fix. We want to get it off, the weight off, but we don't know how to maintain it off for life. So let's consider some of the other variables. So what causes obesity? Well, there are many reasons for the growing obesity issues, and we're going to explore several of them. There are certainly not the be-all and end-all, and it doesn't exhaust all the kinds of causes. There may, in fact, be a number of sources, 12, if you will, that we're going to review that are in your textbook. And these include, when we are eating more calories. That's one of the first there. We're bombarded by non-stop commercials and tempted by tasty treats. many people are consuming more calories per day than they need to, and more importantly, more calories than they're burning off. 2. We tend to have bigger portions. Many restaurants and packaged foods have increased 2 to 5 times the size in the last 20 years. You might know the phenomena of supersize me, that phenomenon. 3. Fast food. People who eat frequently at fast food restaurants gain more weight and develop metabolic abnormalities. That's not to say that all fast food establishments are bad. Certainly there's an increased movement in fast foods to provide healthier alternatives. It is convenient. It seems to be in our faces a lot, and we frequent these locations and get that kind of food because it's momentarily tasty. The long-term associated negative effects from fast food are high calories that come from fat. 4, hunger and satiety. Now, what's at play here are hormones, which may stimulate or suppress hunger. Satiety is a term to describe the feeling of being full. You know, when you eat a meal and you get to a point where, okay, I'm full, that's satiety. And that's when we stop eating. Now, the size of the fat cells may affect how hungry we feel, and there'll be more on that in a little bit later when we talk about more on nutrition and health and the weight loss. 5, physical inactivity is another point. Canadians are not exercising enough. It's not to say that people aren't exercising at all. We're just not exercising as much as a population compared to the rate of obesity, which is climbing. 6, passive entertainment. TVs, computers, iPads, all this technology decreases the time spent engaged in physical activities and increases our food consumption. Eating while you're doing these sorts of things, and this is even starting earlier with very young children having access to many devices before they're even 2 years old. Playing on the iPhone, playing on an iPad, and getting into that sort of rhythm. This is how you entertain, and this is what's desirable and might be taught as desirable. 7, another factor that can play a role is prenatal factors. A woman's weight before conception and weight gain during pregnancy can influence a woman's child's weight. 8, there are developmental factors at play as well. Now, this is what I was mentioning about satiation and hormones. The developmental factors can be influenced by hyperplasia and hypertrophy. Now, these are important influences in obesity, and you can check in your textbooks for these. They are regarding the cell size, which is the fat cells, and the fat cells numbers. So 9, here we go. We have been thinking in regards of obesity and overweight issues. Of course, we have to consider genetics. The GAD2 or the GAD2 in the OB genes may predispose individuals to weight gain and obesity. They're not clear or clear-cut relations of the genetics and obesity. However, abnormalities in genes can create a predisposition to weight gain and obesity. 10. Then another issue is that one probably all can recognize is emotional. Emotional influences our eating patterns. You may know someone who is emotionally affected and copes differently by overeating. Sadness, frustration, and emotional upheavals oftentimes they return to food as a way of coping. 11. Your social networks is another variable. Friends that we have can be significant outcomes or significant effect on the risks of obesity. Maybe we're with a lot of people who aren't physically active themselves and may be engaged in social activities that revolve around fast food restaurants. So who we hang with might influence some of our effects. 12. Some other social determinants. People who live in lower socioeconomic classes tend to be more obese than those in more affluent areas. It might be that education could be a factor here. So it's important when we think about obesity, it's not a single cause or issue. And I've expressed in many of my other classes when we talk about research, one of the areas that's really important to recognize is what's called correlational effect. This isn't to say that cause and effect, there isn't any cause and effect in obesity, but correlational just says there isn't a single cause, but there are other variables that when we see obesity occur, we also see these other variables present. We don't know exactly what the effect is, and it's not necessarily cause and effect, but there might be some other influence that is there that may help explain. So there are correlational, and the 12 that we looked at are all correlational. All right, so how much should I weigh? Well, that's the age-old question, and is there really any right answer? There's no single best weight. However, there is a range of healthy weight to compare against. The best weights, and I'll put that in brackets, have been somewhat of a moving target. They've changed over time, and you'll be depending upon what generation you're from. Historically, some of the generations liked plumper people, and then more recently, we're into more thinness. You come to understand what a reasonable weight is, and it's changed over time. The answering of the question, how much should I weigh? It's been moving from body weight to body composition generally. Now, while researchers gained more insight, what is health, and therefore, what is a healthy weight? One method that's known as the body mass index, or the BMI. The body mass index is a ratio between height and weight. It's a mathematical formula that correlates with body fat. You calculate your body mass index by dividing your weight in kilograms by your height in meters squared. Now, that's not something everybody does. So there is in your textbook an example of a BMI chart, and I'll walk you through it a little bit of that in just a second. Doctors, health professionals, and personal trainers use a BMI to assist in identifying weight-related health risks in populations and in individuals. There are health risks associated with being underweight categories as well as overweight categories. Now, when you look at the underweight category, anybody with a BMI of 18.5 or lower, the risks include undernutrition, osteoporosis, and infertility. The health risk associated with overweight and of being overweight and obese, that's a BMI of 25 or higher. Well, there includes type 2 diabetes, hypertension, disease, sleep apnea, cardiovascular disease, and certain cancers. The BMI has its limitations. Muscular individuals may be incorrectly categorized as overweight or as obese, is it doesn't really reflect body fat. It's not useful for growing children, women who are pregnant or nursing, or for the elderly. Now here's where I'll just walk you through a bit of an example on the chart beside me here. And we'll use me as an example. I'm 190.5 centimeters, 6'3". I weigh 90.5 kilograms. That's about 200 pounds. And that makes me with a BMI of about 25, which puts me on the edge of healthy weight and overweight. Now, I'm not overweight. However, this does show as one of the problems with the BMI with athletic and muscular individuals. I'm older and athletic. All right, so it's measuring me as overweight rather than healthy. Now, I'm big boned, good bone density, and I have low body fat. So for me to be comfortable in in a BMI healthy category, by BMI standards, I need to weigh about 175 pounds. I haven't weighed that since I was in grade 11. That's some 50 years ago. Not a comfortable weight for me now. So that's an important element about the BMI. Now there's another method that's used, and it's called waist circumference. Waist circumference is used along with the BMI oftentimes as a practical indicator of the risks associated with excessive abdominal fat. You'll see in your text figure 6.3 will highlight the risks associated with the two different types of body shapes, the apple and the pear. The Heart and Stroke Foundation of Canada indicates that the following waist circumference guides for men and women. For men, waist circumference of more than 37 inches or 97 centimeters may have increased risks for health issues. More than 40 inches, more than 40 inches or 102 centimeters, substantial risk. For women, waist circumference of more than 31.5 or 80 centimeters have an increased risk for health issues. And then with waist measurements of 35 inches or 88 centimeters, substantial risk. So that would be used with the BMI to help make it a little bit more accurate. Now there is a third method, and this is what's called the waist to hip ratio, or the WHR. The waist to hip ratio is determined by dividing your waist circumference by your hip circumference. The key here is that your WHR is greater than 1 for men or 0.85 for women is considered a sign of higher risk for disease. So these are rough guidelines. They vary from person to person a bit, but they give you some rough idea. Now next, along this line, you might be wondering, well, how is body fat assessed? If I have too much, how do I know how I have too much? If I'm determined and I have additional body fat, how do they assess how much fat is okay? How much should I try to lose? Well, we can remind ourselves from the chapter on personal nutrition. First is essential fats, which make up about 3 to 7% of the body fat in men and 10 to 15% of the body fat in women. It's important to note at this point that these differences in terms of body fat, between men and women, is less about body fat. As for with women, it's what's the difference that gives women their shape, still within the realm of healthiness. Now, the second type of fat, that's known as storage fat. And for healthy adults, this is somewhere between 7 and 25% for men and 16 to 35% for women. Now, there are several methods for assessing body composition. And these are included in your textbook, but I'll sort of go through them kind of quickly to give you some thought on them. I've also added some graphics for each of these to show you a bit about what these assessments will look like. Now we're going to begin with what's known as the skin fold measurement. And it's a fairly common assessment. Perhaps you've had it done. It's a caliper. And they use it to measure the thickness of skin folds. You pick your skin and they pinch it. I'm making sure I have it in the image. And they measure that and they pick it out of different spots. So one of the places they check is the tricep, the back of your upper arm. They check there. They do the bicep, or the front of your upper arm. The subscapular, just below the tip of your shoulder blade at your back. The chest, between your nipple and forearm. And abdomen, next to your belly button. And the suprailiac, or iliac, also known as our love handles, on our thigh, about halfway between the top of our leg and our knee, and then the medial calf, about middle inside lower leg. They would do this 2 or 3 repeated measures and then calculate the average for fat. One score would then be compared to others based on age, sex, race, and other factors, just to ensure proper measurement and proper calibration in terms of what does it mean with the results that you get based on age, sex, race, and other additional factors. Now, there is a second method to assess fat, and it's a bioelectrical impedance analysis. Now, this uses a BIA analyzer. And you'll see that behind me there, where a low level of electric current is passed through the body, and the impedance, which is known as the Z, to flow of the current that travels through water that is found in muscle and fat. And that's what's measured. That gives us a reading about body fat in our bodies. Now, a third method is called the dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, the DXA. The X-rays are used to quantify the skeletal and soft tissue components of our body mass. About 10 to 20 minutes with low radiation is all that is required. It is thought that the DXA and hydrostatic weighing may become the future of body composition assessment. Now, I just mentioned hydrostatic weighing. This is underwater weighing. And it's a pretty popular one. With this one, we are measuring the weight of displacement of water. Essentially, you're put into a tank of water, and the amount of water that displaces over the edge while you get in helps to determine fat levels. Since muscle is a higher density than water, and fat has a lower density, therefore, someone with more fat will displace less water than lean individuals. Lastly, is air displacement plethysmography. Now, this measure of fat is similar to hydrostatic weighing, except instead of water, we're displacing air. Okay. The next question that you might arise may be, well, I'm aware that calories are important to my weight, so how many calories do I need? Well, again, this is not as simple as you might want or need it to be. We can't just say everybody needs 2,500 or 1,500 calories. The EER, also known as the Estimated Energy Requirements, which is the dietary energy intake that is predicted to maintain energy balance in our healthy adults. You'll see in our next, you'll see in your text on the EERs for different age and activity levels. That's table 6.1. So have a peek at that and see just where you fit. All right. Now, one of the most of our daily caloric expenditure, about 90% of what we spend our calories on, Most of our daily caloric expenditure, about 90%, occurs because of our resting metabolic rate. That just means that the 10% remaining of energy expenditures is defined as exercise metabolic rate, which comes in all forms of daily physical activities. It doesn't mean that we have to be working out on a regular basis. It just means we need to be moving. If we're moving and it's above our resting metabolic rate, it's a benefit. Next, we should consider some of the health dangers of excessive weight. Now, most of these you're probably familiar with. The younger an individual is when they gain weight, the more health risks they face over their lifetime. So if you're overweight as a child and you maintain that overweightedness, it puts you at a higher risk than someone who gained the weight later in life. A higher chance of becoming overweight or obese throughout a life. A greater likelihood of high total cholesterol levels than other cardiovascular disease risks, such as elevated blood pressure. There's a higher prevalence of type 2 diabetes. There is a bit of a positive thing about type 2 diabetes, and it's that it's correctable. Increased risk of premature death. Physiological changes that are equivalent to 20 years of aging over a lifetime. So that just means, so instead of living to age 80 in some cases, that drops your age mortality rate to 60. That's significant. So many chronic diseases and serious health issues have been linked to being overweight or obese. The incidence of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, cancer, and many other health problems are associated with being overweight and obese. Premature death have increased with the degree of overweightness in both sexes. In our calorie-conscious and thinness-obsessed society, obesity also affects quality of life, including a sense of vitality. Okay, I hope this has been helpful for our part 1. In part 2, we're going to follow with a little bit more focus on the practical guide to weight management. This is including avoiding diet traps. We will also consider gaining weight and some psychosocial perspectives on weight management. Lastly, we'll touch on the unhealthy eating behaviors. All right, everybody, carry on the good work, and we'll see you in the next video in part 2.